Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy.
And today we have with us for our very first interview, Marty up north. He has been great at canvassing, but also letting us know how things are looking on the ground and giving a lot of data points about how the Alberta Independence Petition has been going. Please go follow him at Marty up north on X. And also thank you so much to him for joining us today. So we have Marty up north with us. Thank you so much for being here. How are you, first of all?
Oh, I'm doing great, actually. Sitting, looking out. It's bright outside. We're in a complete whiteout outside right now. There's a snowstorm, an April snowstorm.
Well, we appreciate you being here because you're literally our first interview. We've mainly done 6 days a week live, Monday through Saturday. So it's nice to start going into interviews, and you're really representative of like the blue collar or your ordinary Albertan. So I think it's really fitting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe myself as. Well, I mean, I have a blue collar side to me, but technically, I'm a white collar. I'm an engineer, so I spent the majority of my career in the offices. I spent a lot of time on site, working on site, but to me, the blue collar guys are the millwrights, the mechanics, the electricians. You know what I mean? So I'm more of a white collar guy, but appreciate the comment.
But you've also been doing amazing at canvassing, but also letting people know how it's going and informing everybody, both inside and outside, of how that whole process has been going. And it's been very valuable to us as well. So thank you, first of all.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's my handle, right? You see me online as Marty Up North, unacceptable fact checker. The fact checker is true. It's a role I take seriously. I'm an engineer by training. I spent 35 years as a professional engineer, and I found that I have a nice way of explaining things, and that's why I think I have a big audience. I'm known for a guy who can break down complex things into simpler things, easy to understand. Unacceptable, of course, comes from my political stance, and Trudeau doesn't like guys like me, and I guess subsequently Carney doesn't seem to like guys like me either.
Well, yeah, you're a huge asset to our show because our show airs Monday to Saturday, and we do a lot of X posts, articles, feeds, stuff like that. And you seem to pop up more than anybody else. You're really touching on the issues that are probably the most important, not just to Alberta, but to Canada.
And even
Yeah,
outside.
yeah. Go ahead. No, I mean that's not by that's one of the things I spend a lot of time honestly trying to do. Right. We live in a fragile democracy, and I've always said that a democracy definitely needs an educated voter, and needs the government, the opposition, and media, and it needs what do I call a professional class to vet policies and things like that. And all those things are missing in our modern democracy, especially the media. And so I consider myself sort of playing a role in three of those pillars, right? I do help educate voters. I do criticize government and hold government accountable. I get criticized for that all the time, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit about this. People don't like the fact that I'm critical of conservative governments and liberal governments, and I'm like, nah, it's who I am. Like, just because a government has a certain color or political stripe doesn't give them a veto, or prevent them from being criticized by me. I mean, I don't understand why people find that so upsetting, that holding government accountable. But
Absolutely. And that's in the tradition of a lot of Western cultures. That used to be the tradition. Things are really shifting in the West, not just with free speech, but holding governments accountable and not getting captured by groupthink.
Mhm.
right, yeah, yeah.
But
So that's why I show up.
and thank you for that. But also on canvassing and just getting a little bit into canvassing, first of all, what motivated you to go and do that, but then also inform all of us and post it online and say how everything was going?
Um, Interesting. Honestly, at first I wasn't going to canvas, because the government sort of set rules around canvassing, which in and of itself, the rules upset me. Right, like let's step back. Right, canvassing is collecting signatures basically, and I always thought that collecting signatures is a God-given right to citizens. But we have this thing called the Citizens Initiative Act in Alberta that formalizes how we petition, and also, more importantly, formalizes that if we meet a certain threshold in the petition, that the government is forced to act. Because, for the majority of the last 50 years, if citizens canvassed and collected signatures to petition the government ignored it. But Danielle Smith passed a law that makes it hard for her to ignore. So that's step one. So at first, I wasn't going to canvass because I thought, again, I'm following their rules. But I also wasn't going to canvass because because of the rules, I was afraid. The rules are very strict in Alberta. I was afraid that I was too much of an influencer, and I could, in a sense, damage the movement and give Elections Alberta, that supervises the process, an opportunity to, um, to 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 find an opportunity to negate the process. So at first I was reluctant to canvass, but then weeks gone by, and then I started talking to people, and I'm like, nope, this is too important. I got to go out and canvass. So I've been out of the, we've been canvassing since about early January. I'm upwards of 30 or 40 days now spent on the side of the road at my favorite little spot, about 4 hours a day, collecting signatures. It's just too important to me. It's existential, and I needed to be part of it.
Yeah, you actually, on your updates on your X, you're constantly giving updates on how many signatures you have and the people that are working with you. That was a huge help for us to inform the general public, especially in our opening segments, about where the signatures are at, to give people confidence this thing is coming along. It was also allowing other canvassers to kind of see where somebody else was at. So I think that was a huge help.
Mhm.
I'm a data guy. That's what I did at work. I mean, I used to have a philosophy, not used to, I still have a philosophy. You shouldn't make decisions without data. And so for me, I wish there was more data. I honestly wish that the people that, the main canvasser, the main petitioner is Mitch Sylvester. I've met Mitch on several occasions. I've had chances to talk to him. I always encouraged him to publish the number, and he was reluctant to do so. He has lots of reasons. Maybe you'll interview Mitch someday, but I felt it important to share the data. And then locally, we set up a little competition. It's just fun among ourselves, right? I mean, I got a group of people, and we challenge each other. We did the math, to meet the threshold set out by Elections Alberta. We need like 177,000 signatures. So I was just doing some math in my head, going, if each area gets 3,000 signatures, we'll get there. And we set ourselves a little goal in our area of beating that in case another area didn't do so good. So yeah, it's going well. We met the threshold. I mean, that's the big news, right? We met the threshold.
Exactly.
Well, part of a canvasser's job, at least from the outside looking in, is obviously signatures, but it seems like a lot of canvassers are hitting another crucial aspect, and that's having conversations with people that are going to sign the petition or not sign the petition there. And even if they're not going to sign, I think these conversations can really open their mind. Can you maybe talk about some different people or interactions you had on the with?
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. I'm on the record as saying everybody should canvass. Maybe on anything, right? You should canvass for this, but you should canvass to experience what it's like to go door knocking and talking to people. Um, for me, it's fascinating. I mean, there's people. Let me step back a bit. I published my statistics, right? And one of the people who's with me all the time is my wife. So we're at the same station, usually collecting signatures, and she's collecting more signatures than I am. But I always say that's because I talk to people, and this is what I do, right? First of all, I like debating. I like talking. So when somebody signs, when they're sitting there signing, I usually act very official, right? I just ask the formal questions. Are you a Canadian citizen over 18? And then I get them to sign. Then very often when somebody's signed, I'll finally say, okay, now that you've signed, can I ask you why you've signed, or why you won't sign, or whatever? I'll ask questions. Actually, there's a reason I do that. I'll come back to that. But so then I get up and I talk. I move away from the table to not interfere, and then I have those chats. Those chats are important for there's 30% in any election, 30% are already decided, 30% are totally against, and you got that middle ground. So I find talking important, because the more important phase is not collecting the signatures. The more important phase will be the actual campaign once we have the referendum. But no, I found also, I mean, I could tell you stories all day long. I'll summarize it this way. There's no single demographic. I can't nail who signs. Everybody signs. It's like if I look at who's come to sign my signatures or sign at my station, I've had old, new, blue collar, white collar, white, racialized, First Nations, government workers, private sector, everybody. It's really, really fascinating to see who comes and signs. What's been enlightening for me is I've become a bit of a target, and I can pinpoint who is opposed. And unfortunately, the people most opposed to it are the ones closer to my demographic. It's I'm 58, uh, white, older white male Canadians, Albertans are the ones that are generally the ones who come around and throw insults and are completely against this whole process. It's been fascinating to observe.
Yeah,
Like yeah.
That
it's
is fascinating because I would pinpoint it maybe as older white women, but it's interesting that it's the guys.
It could be that the guys have a little more courage to
Yeah.
come talk to me versus the ladies. I mean, if you follow me, you've seen a few incidents. I've had some crazy ladies, like the
Yeah.
crazy cat ladies exist, but the guys are more likely. It's like I actually become a little bit on edge when because I'm standing there on the side of the road, right? And
Yeah.
I play a game with my fellow canvassers. We see a car approaching and we're like friend or foe, and you can see how sometimes they'll drive by and then they'll go down, they'll stop, and that's perhaps because there's other people's around signing signatures. So they'll wait till people leave and then they'll come by, which is why I just wanted to go back. The reason I often talk to people is to get to know them, know what their reasons are, and prepare for other debates. But I also talk to keep people around on purpose. So once somebody's signed and sometimes they're in a hurry to leave, and that's when I'll say, "Hey, what do you do for a living? Nice car you got there." And I'm keeping them on purpose for two reasons: A, to avoid other lunatics coming by, and B, it makes it look like there's a crowd, right? It's my little trick. So every time there's somebody signing, you keep them a little bit longer, and then until one or two more cars show up, and just tricks I learned while canvassing.
But it's funny you learned that trick. I used to be a bouncer. That was always one of my night jobs. And you always want to keep a little bit of a line out front in order to fill the club up.
Bingo. There you go. Yeah.
And when you're having when they come now, usually older white male apparently, and are completely against it, do they ever give reasonings, or do they ever want to talk, or just insults?
No, some of them want to talk, and the talk usually the talk is mainstream media talking points. They'll come out of their car and they'll say, they won't even they never even start by asking me, why are you doing this, or why are you mad, or why do you think you're getting a bum deal. They don't even ask me why I've been sitting on the side of the road for 120 hours, which is bizarre, right? If you really were concerned, you should start there. Why am I angry? Nope. They step out and they immediately go, "You guys are nuts," and they start rhyming off things as you're landlocked, you're going to be isolated from the rest of Canada. What's your dollar going to be? And then if I try and go back and forth and answer a few questions, it degenerates quickly into the Americans are going to invade us. Donald Trump is bad. Donald Trump's a pedophile. That's almost where it ends. Like it's literally. I wish I had more playbacks and recordings, but it's predictable.
Well, it's
Sorry, but I mean, I've had a few serious people though. Like there are serious people who come by, usually with somebody else, right? A car will stop by and one person signs and the other person doesn't want to sign. Those are the ones I like. Like those are legitimate conversations. Actually, there's an interesting subgroup too. There's a university professor here at one of the colleges. I'm pretty sure I know his name is Dwayne Bratt, and I'm pretty sure Dwayne's the one doing this. He's sending his students to my station specifically to come debate me, and I laugh with those kids. I call them kids. Sometimes they're 22, 23, and I'm like, you can go back and tell Dwayne you did your best. Like. I imagine somewhere out there next semester there'll be a whole bunch of papers written on the pros and cons of Alberta's separation as debated with whatever Marty up north or something like that.
I was going to say we've been really surprised with our show that there's actually a lot of people from the First Nations that are supporting Alberta independence. It almost seems like a divide between the elites and the actual people of the tribe, or the citizens of the tribe. Have you been having any First Nations people come out and sign or anything like that?
Oh yeah, lots. We're very close to a First Nation reserve nearby called Morley, and so we've had them. I see them come by all the time. They have a treaty card, so they're very identifiable when they have a treaty card. But I also had the chief from Morley. I posted about this because the chief from Morley stopped by and was all pissed off and I'll say this, right. There is a divide on the First Nation reserves mostly, right? It's a topic for a whole other day, but there's a lot of corruption there, and the elitism that you mentioned is even more, the divide between the leadership and the elite and the average person on a reserve is even more pronounced than in the general society. The Chiefs get a lot of money from Ottawa, and for them it's self-preservation. In fact, you should have a guy like Keith Wilson or some of the other guys come on your show in the coming weeks, because just along that topic, today is a big day. The injunction, there's 6 chiefs that are trying to block the whole process, and the injunction, their hearing starts today in Edmonton. So a huge divide on the First Nations reserves themselves.
Yeah, one of the other groups, what's very interesting, because Igor has been privately, he's another social media content creator, talking to a lot of immigrant families and stuff like this, or new Canadians. And a lot of them seem to be scared to sign the petition because of things that have happened in their country. Me personally, I actually think even if they're not going to sign on the day of the vote, they're not going to come out and vote against Alberta independence. So yeah. What are your thoughts?
No, I've witnessed that a few times. I remember a couple coming by from same thing. It usually is 2-3 people come by in a car, and one person signed, and then the other 2 ladies would not sign. If I remember correctly, they were from Brazil or some South American country, and they said bluntly, like, they don't trust, they don't in back home, putting your name on a piece of paper like that is too dangerous. But I guarantee you're right. Those people will probably, in the confidence and the security of a proper polling station, will probably vote.
Yeah.
Now I'm always trying to talk to the youth. I don't know if they listen to me. I used to work at 2 different high schools back when we lived in Vancouver, but I'm always saying that the young people are also very important. And I'm really curious as to if they're actually motivated and they see it as an opportunity to build a new nation that will actually respect them and give them opportunities, or if they're kind of lagging behind, or are they showing up, or is that a group that needs to be reached out to further?
No, they're showing up. They're showing up. Great question. They show up to sign. Boy, if we could sign online, like if the petition could be signed online, we would get that group. They show up to sign. They don't show up at events, and a lot of people say, how come they're not at events? Well, you got to think about it, right? Like, if you're 25 to 35 years old and there's a talk at a community hall on a Thursday night, well, what are those people doing? They just got home from work, they're taking care of their kids, so they're like, I find it odd that people try to use, I get that all the time. People will take a picture of a town hall and go, it looks pretty old. It's like, yeah, but different groups meet we engage with different groups in different ways. And back to the older generation that are against this petition, a lot of them, it's a nostalgia for a Canada that no longer exists, like, purely. And the youth don't have that nostalgia. Like, if you're 28 years old today, or 27, my kids, I have 4 adult children. My youngest is 25. And my kids are that kind of generation. I have one son who missed 3 years of high school because he was at home during COVID. And then he comes out, and he's not a fan of NHL hockey. He's not a fan of old Canadian institutions, because he didn't experience them. Yeah. I mean, the Olympics just played in Italy, and they didn't watch the Olympics. They have no nostalgia for the old Canada. The pride of the flag means nothing to them. And then they're starting out as adults in a world of, like, high inflation, high cost, unaffordable housing. It's like, young Albertan males and females are a totally different beast. They're signing. They're already checked out. They're checked out.
Good.
Yeah.
If they're still here, because exactly. A lot of them have already left.
Yeah, it was very interesting because we profiled a story the other day on the show about a job fair, and there was thousands of kids outside, and one of the mothers was there kind of filming it, and she's like, I don't even think my son's going to get in here. I'm like, this was a perfect opportunity, and if there are job fairs coming up, there's so few jobs. A lot of these kids are being disenfranchised. They're just sitting in that line, even if we can't get them to sign, maybe just to open up a conversation, because that is a place to access the youth, are these job fairs, I would think.
Well, I'll tell you this. So I keep stats of who, of our group of canvassers and who's collecting the most signatures. People think I'm doing well because I think I'm at 605. The best canvasser in our group is a 22-year-old kid who goes on campus and collects signatures.
Wow.
I don't resonate on campus. I mean, I'm actually going there tonight to listen to a lecture, and I will bring my stuff. But he sits in in the cafeteria on campus and he just collects signatures all day long. So he's knocking it out of the park. And so there are kids hitting these places. But again, the kids are struggling so much right now that they're actually unfortunately not as politically engaged from a volunteer point of view, right? They'll engage when you come to them, but they're not coming to our meetings. And like, there are very few young canvassers, but the ones we have, boy, they're good.
Oh, very interesting. 2,200 signatures. That sounds like a young Charlie Kirk there.
Something like that. I mean, I've been meaning to go see him actually. I think he's doing it on campus today. I hope he's lucky because they're returning to class after a week off or something like that. So yeah.
Well, yeah, there was actually a canvassing event from a few kids taking the day off school today because kids are coming back and they're going to try to get signatures. We're going to profile that on tonight's show, I think.
Yeah. Now, I just for you and because you have viewers, I want to stay on the education because it gets brought up a lot, right? How do we engage people?
Mhm.
And there was a huge engagement prior to the petition. So you had groups like the Alberta Prosperity Project. Lots of groups are promoting this. But then because we are currently in the petition phase, we entered an interesting phase. So while we're collecting signatures, the advertising's gone down because to advertise during the petition phase, a group has to sign up as a third-party advertiser with Elections Alberta. It's complicated, and not a lot of the groups want to do it right now. The only group who's really set up during this phase is Stay Free Alberta. They were set up to collect signatures, and their advertising budget is limited to $500,000. So during this phase, the focus is on collecting signatures. The focus is in collecting signatures to get the threshold to declare to get the premier to declare a referendum. In the next phase, which will start sometime in mid-May or June, expect a whole bunch of other third-party advertisers to finally set up and start a real advertising campaign. And if each one of them is allowed $500,000, then we'll have millions of dollars to advertise and to promote independence. But right now, it's frustrating for a lot of people. I get asked that all the time. How come you guys aren't advertising? It's like, we don't have money for it. I mean, the money's spent on small events like booking. There was an event in Calgary recently where the organizers booked a hall. It's $10,000 to book the hall for 4,000 people to come to collect 2,000 signatures. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're talking $5 a signature and you're spending a lot of that budget. So I'm not worried. I'm glad we met the threshold. I think this week's hearing is important. The injunction hearing, the by-elections in Ottawa next week are important. And then I think come May, the campaign will be, and I'm talking a lot, but I want to keep going to this also.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, up until now, the most vocal people are us, the pro-separation group. The other side's been quiet, right? On purpose. They're trying to make this as a fringe movement, a non-event. They're all waiting to see how this goes. But come May, if Danielle Smith, the premier of the province, says there will be a referendum and there will be a question on separation on October 19th, the other side can't stay quiet.
Absolutely.
So now we're going to have a public debate, right? Because I've been challenging the other side, like, come on, tell me why we should stay. But they're not biting. They're not coming. First, well, they don't have an argument. I mean, there's very few arguments for it. But come May, we're into the campaign's a whole different beast.
Absolutely.
Totally different.
Absolutely. I was going to say we are kind of starting to enter the next phase, and the petition phase was crucially important because if we didn't get that right, there would be no referendum. You're in kind of two spaces, which is nice. You're a petitioner, but you're also in the social media space. So I think there's an easy transition for you, but there's around 7,000 canvassers there. What do you think a lot of those canvassers are going to do? Are they going to stop? Or are they going to transition into an education or?
Oh, you're a little bit behind the time, so you don't know the other groups projects I'm working on. So those projects I talked about, the
Campaigning.
the campaigning, So I'm involved with a group called the Centurion Project, and it's with David Parker. And so if you ever want to interview somebody extremely interesting in Canadian, especially Alberta politics, it's David Parker. And David's a kingmaker. Like David got Jason Kenney installed, but then he had him removed and had Smith installed. And Parker's kind of enemy number one for a lot of politicians. So we saw all this great. I mean, Stay Free Alberta and the Alberta Prosperity Project. Yes, they have an army of volunteers, beautiful army of volunteers, but unfortunately, they're a little disorganized. Which is another reason I became a canvasser, is to sneak in and start helping get organized. And that group has recognized that they've reached their limits of organizational skills and campaigning. And now we're starting to collaborate. So there's going to be the campaigning phase. We're building that army. We're not going to let those 7,000 canvassers just suddenly disappear into the sunset. We're training them to become better canvassers, better campaigners, and to really win this thing. So
Well,
yeah, it's
Oh,
going to be
that's
interesting.
That's fantastic to hear, actually. And can you give the name of that organization? Because we do have a lot of petitioners that watch the show. Maybe they can get in contact with him.
when
It's
it when it
it's
comes.
this it's called the Centurion Project. I'll send you a link, but it's the Centurion Project. And right now the Centurion Project is basically replicating what the online petition, or the petitioning is, or the signature collection. We're actually volunteering or recruiting 1,000 volunteers to go through the Alberta phone book and find who all are the supporters. We're replicating what's happening on the ground, but we're building a database to do it. And then we'll start unleashing people to campaign later on. But yeah, it's the Centurion Project.
Oh, fantastic.
Especially now that you got kind of into the whole campaigning aspect that we're kind of shifting towards around May or May, June, and will be incredibly important. We are seeing this obvious divide that we've continued to see in Canada between the mainstream media and the social media, and the important aspects of independent people that talk about topics that are usually can't be talked about. And especially now that you mentioned that petitioners can become or turn into volunteers for campaigning, social media becomes even more important. But we're also seeing the censorship bills C9, C22, which are pretty scary, also coming in almost at the same time. And we will, as you mentioned, probably see the attacks, I will call them, from the nationalists and from the federal government also coming in at that time. So I think it's really good that that's being looked into, and that you're kind of creating an army as well, maybe to go against that, and you have all those people now.
Yes, I mean, some people say, "Oh my God, how do you handle the current attacks?" I'm like, I'm getting prepared, because we haven't even seen anything. This is nothing. The attacks right now are nothing compared to what's
That's what we continue to say as well, that like this is probably a blip, and we've also kind of seen it during the Freedom Convoy and other things that were similar to this, giving a spark of hope to some people. The attacks can get pretty nasty.
Well, maybe
Just one thing that I'm encouraged, though, is that's finally starting to resonate, is that there's more of us than there are of
Yep.
them. And so, like, one weird, like, even now I'm getting less nervous about, like, we got threatened by Elections Alberta. Like, Elections Alberta tried to find ways, like I said earlier, I was worried about becoming a canvasser and crossing that line between influencing and Elections Alberta and campaigning and stuff like that. And they came after me. But luckily a lot of people came to my defense, and I basically told them, like, you're sorry, but you're barking up the wrong tree. If you come after me, I will literally go on the side of the road and I will canvass. I will take those sheets that you gave me, I will rip them up, and I will make my own sheets, and I will wait until you come and try to arrest me, because the best visual in the world will be you putting me in a police cruiser because I'm sitting on the side of the road collecting signatures. And that goes for the weird this whole injunction that's being heard by the courts today. Again, if the courts decide that if a judge is so compromised that it decides to grant the injunction, I'll be in contempt of court. I will sit on the side of the road, and there's enough people that will come and sit with me. Like, we learned from the trucker convoys and the protests that we need to cross arms together and stand, hold the line, as Tamara Litch said. By the way, I'm going to see Tamara tonight at the U of A. Hold the line, folks. Like, there's no, yeah.
Well, they're
Yeah.
coming after people for petty things. I mean, they sent John Bolton a warning letter as well for a bouncy
Yes.
castle. I loved his
Yes.
videos and his sarcasm. He had to respond to them. Good on John Bolton there. But before we move into social media and stuff, I did have one more question about canvassing. And that was because we're starting to come close to the end of the canvassing phase for Alberta. If Saskatchewan kind of goes next, would you have any advice for canvassers there? Or like maybe my advice would be don't go in the middle of the dead of winter. Try to schedule it for the summertime if you can.
Yeah, no, there's a reason why we scheduled it when we did, right? Because there's a blackout period between elections, and so we wanted, and there is a provincial election in 2027, so we wanted a referendum this year. We had no choice. But to your point, try and schedule the canvassing to be in the better months. But before you pull the trigger on canvassing, get crazy organized. Like get organized, get your captains, decide how you're going to collect. I would tell them, reach out to us. If anybody in Saskatchewan thinking about canvassing, reach out to us for some experience firsthand, get organized and publish the numbers. I'm insisting on that. Publish the numbers because movements grow like that. People want to get behind a movement, right? You don't get behind a hit song if you don't think it's a hit song. So I think it's the same way. I hope Saskatchewan does it. I really do. I think they will.
I do as well. But I think there was a huge advantage to Alberta by being first to move. I think you really caught the federal government off guard. I mean, they were somewhat prepared, but really not really. And I see Carney putting a lot more roadblocks in the way with this 30 by 30 program and other things that could hinder Saskatchewan. And I've been saying on the show, Saskatchewan, I hope we really start to see a lot of movement there very soon.
Yep.
And then you're invaluable to them as well at that point because you went through it first and you kind of got those roadblocks. You know what's coming.
Yeah.
Like you knew what's coming. You can see. You can kind of the organization, especially. I would say
It's a big organization and treat it with the seriousness that it deserves.
deserves.
It's a project, and so it's the same thing in business. You can have somebody who's got a great idea but sucks on execution. So you hire people to help you with the execution. So I think we suffered of that a little bit in Alberta here. Mitch Sylvester, fantastic job promoting this, fantastic job getting it off the ground. But Mitch could have reached out to a better group and stepped aside a little bit. There's no shame in stepping aside and letting professional campaign managers run your campaign. That's all.
Well,
So yeah.
There has been a little bit talk about having a face to the movement, possibly Keith Wilson, because it has been a grassroots movement with no leader. And going into the summertime, there's probably going to be a lot of attacks from Federalists. And with so many voices, the mainstream media might be able to take up some fringe voices that have different ideas in Alberta independence. And it would be nice to have that leader of like Keith Wilson to sit things straight if there's other kind of framing.
I hear that all the time. A movement, the leadership, or maybe not a leader, but definitely official, better spokespeople will emerge. But right now, it suits us very well to have several leaders and be more grassroots. Not even leaders, to be more grassroots. The opposition is getting target fatigue. They don't know who to go after. It's hilarious. I mean, yeah.
And I mean that too, but we will see Keith Wilson doing the debates with Jason Kenney, and we have seen Jason Kenney attempting to debate on this subject before. Not doing so great, in my opinion, but I think that might help also steer and quell some doubts, or at least some of the other talking points that hopefully that the Federalists still think they have.
Yeah.
Well, kind of how I see in the United States anyway, around 2016, there was a big conflict between mainstream media and independent media, and they had that out, and independent media really won the space and the day. I really see Alberta independence as being that moment in Canada where I think the mainstream media is going to go head to head with the independent media. What are your views on that?
I think that battle's already sort of happened. Like maybe I live in a bit of a different, strange place, but we don't watch a lot of mainstream media in Alberta. Like it's already, I don't know. It's not, whatever they're trying to do is not working. And I'm rambling a little bit, but I don't see it as a big. I think the mainstream's lost that battle already. They've lost that battle.
Do you think with Carney's censorship bills, I think Alberta's moved pretty quick, so he's going to have a tough time implementing them in Alberta.
He's going to have a hard time implementing them, and I still believe that Danielle Smith is moving us in the right direction. If you look at some of the things she's done lately, I mean, she hasn't tackled that. She can only tackle so much. Her priorities right now have been on protecting children and tackling the unions and bringing control under bringing the government back under control. If speech really gets threatened by somebody in Alberta, she'll fix that pretty quickly. She's shown that she can, she's just being patient. It's not the urgent matter that needs to be dealt with, but I think if push comes to shove, she'll deal with it quickly. She's a libertarian. I mean, some days she's a little confusing, but at the end of the day, she believes in free speech and capital markets and libertarian ideas, and she proves it time and time again.
Well, it was good to see her kind of lean a little bit back towards Alberta independence. We were pretty hard on her when we said she was muddying the waters with the 9 questions, but she's kind of cleared that up, said it's going to go on the top of the ballot and they're going to count that first. And if it's a positive vote for independence, that they're going to ignore the other 9 questions.
I mean, I'm trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. I'm trying to give her the benefit of the doubt that she's still sort of naively trying to get a better deal for Alberta through the proper channels. I think eventually she's going to wake up. I mean, even today, Carney's press release today is another $51 billion major projects announcement, right? Like $51 billion to municipalities. When you look at the list, it's all municipalities, and it's something that already irritates Danielle to no end, which is the announcement today is an example of Ottawa overstepping its boundaries. Ottawa is not supposed to do anything to do with municipalities, but today they announced 13 projects that are mostly wastewater and related infrastructure related projects. And I'm going to poke her on that one. I mean, like, Danielle, you're being played. You keep being played. So I'd love her to come on board with us. I mean, speak about an amazing spokesperson. How amazing would it if Danielle was actually truly on board with independence? My God, we'd be unstoppable.
Well,
unstoppable.
She's taken an absolute fantastic path when you compare her to Pierre Poilievre. And yeah, I can't continue to praise Danielle Smith. I mean, I'll push back when there's something I don't like, but for the most part, I'm pretty happy with her.
Yep.
And speaking of,
I mean, I'll be honest. I push back a little bit. Like, one of the things she does that I don't like is her fiscal policies. Like, from a fiscal point of view, I just don't like it, and I challenge her on that, and then I quickly realize I better back off. She's way too popular, way too nice, way too light, and so even though I'm not happy with her fiscal policies, I let that slip, and I praise her for everything else she's doing.
Maybe I'll give you a hypothetical here. Let's just say Alberta independence does go through and it is successful and we do separate. Do you think Danielle Smith would go to Canada or try to run for something within Alberta?
Too early to tell. I mean, we'll have to see where she stands during the campaign. I think she's going to try and stay neutral during the campaign, which is a bit of a chicken shit move. I would say she will go. She'll go national. If the vote passes, I think she'll be noble about it and step down, let somebody else take over, and then we'll see her reappear somewhere else in the next year or so.
Yeah.
Especially because she's built her career over there and not in a free, independent new country that is Alberta.
Well, I wanted to ask some little bit random questions. We profile a lot of content creators on the channel to try to build a grassroots movement of where people can go to get good information about Alberta independence. Are there any content creators you really turn to on a daily basis or on X or YouTube or anything like that you could recommend to an audience?
Well, you mentioned John Bolton. John's pretty good. To be honest, I turn to the internet pretty much every day. I turn to Stats Canada, and I look for data. I mean, I'm guilty of this. I do go look at the mainstream media every day, and
we do too.
But it's not because I want the in-depth knowledge that they're providing. It's because they have bigger teams and they can look at issues, and I just want to see what issues they're following, and then I dive into the issues on my own. But no, from from an Alberta point of view, uh, John is probably the better one lately. You mentioned Igor, but he's not that big. He's growing. No, no, no. Come see me. That's what I say to
Yes.
folks. Come see
I was
me.
gonna say, aside from you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
on X, you're probably the best on X. And as far as YouTube, we recommend a lot of different people on YouTube, but by far you are the best source on X. That's why we did want to interview you. And like you said, it's all stats and data, which goes good for our show because it's so news-based and fact-based.
Well, and and I'll explain this. I'll give away a secret, right? I am trying to use X to get a message out. And but the problem with X and every other platform is the darn algorithm, right? So you gotta get the algorithm in your favor. I mean, like for instance, I disappear and I go hiking for 4 or 5 days, and then I come back. It's like swimming upstream, right? I've disappeared off X, and I got to regain the impressions. So in order to stay on top, I have to do, let's say, 20 posts a day. Out of the 20 posts a day, there's 4 or 5 that are real posts that I want people to pay attention to. The other 16, you can just ignore them, right? Maybe I will find a trick. Maybe I'll put a star or some symbol or something to let people know these are the real posts. This is what you should read,
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's too bad that X has become that way, but yeah, I'm not on X too, and I think you guys have figured it out. Most people have figured this out. Actually, some people have a hard time figuring this out. I've been sitting on the side of the road canvassing for 30 days out of the last 60, a total of 120 hours. I mean, there was a picture the other day of me sitting alone reading a book, collecting signatures. I'm not in this for the money. I'm retired. I live on an acreage. I'm perfectly happy. I'm not in this for money. You don't see Marty up north, t-shirts, sweaters, everything. I don't do any of that. And people have a hard time understanding that I have no access to the levers of power.
Yeah.
I don't work for the government. I'm not paid by any government. You can look at me. I'm wearing a shitty t-shirt. I'm in my office. Those are old CDs on the back. And in the pictures, I'm wearing rubber boots and pants I bought at Costco. Like, folks, I don't work for the government. I don't work for the parties. I don't work for Danielle Smith. I don't work for Stay Free Alberta. I don't work for anybody. I'm just a guy with a passion for getting the word out. And then this movement for me is truly existential. I lived through an amazing Alberta, and I've seen what Ottawa's been personally firsthand because of my career. I've seen firsthand what Ottawa's trying to do to Alberta, and it's ugly. So I'm truly fighting for the future of my kids and my grandkids.
And I think that's a very important point that you bring up, that you are literally just doing it for passion. And I think a lot of people don't fully, as you said, grasp that or understand that. And always, I mean, we get told like, oh, you're being paid by XYZ. And it's like, no, it's because we're passionate. We already became independent from Canada when we left, and there wasn't a movement like the independence of Alberta at the time, which was about 2.5 years ago, that we decided years ago to leave when we saw how the federal government treated not just Alberta, but all of Canada as well. And it is really good to hear, and really good to, I think, say it over and over again, that you're doing it because you care, not because you're in it for the money, because there isn't much anyways. And making that clear, and that distinction between some that might be as well.
Yeah, like I'm sitting on the side of the highway for 6 hours a day. Thankfully I got great, amazing neighbors and fellow Albertans who come by and bring me a coffee and have a chat. But that's it.
Yeah, it's very interesting also because we're heavily on YouTube, and that was our original platform. It's hard with two people to do multiple platforms, but we recently went to X, and we use X a little bit different than most. It's a companion to the show, so people know to reference all the stories that we're kind of posting that day. But I have noticed when other people like or repost our stuff, that particular day on the show, there is a huge increase. So if there are other content creators watching, a lot of content creators, because the movement is grassroots and a lot of people are just learning to do social media, X is a great way to kind of boost your other platforms and get the message out there for independence, I find.
Yeah. Now, what time zone are you guys in?
Same as you.
Same as you, but
Same as me.
Mexico City.
Yeah.
Yeah, so from a Canadian point of view, I'm totally disadvantaged by being on the West Coast, right?
Mhm.
Because by the time I get up, there's been 2-3 hours of stories already, so I'm totally late to the stories, and the algorithm punishes me accordingly every day. And that'd be a fascinating experiment for me to do, is to just go to Ontario for a month and see what would happen to my engagement if it changes. But maybe someday. I have no interest in going to Ontario. People keep saying that you should come visit Toronto.
You don't want to go to a prison.
No, yeah.
Trying to leave.
I was going to ask, maybe we'll go into just different federal strategies when it's going to come to Alberta independence in the summertime. What do you see as the major oppositional figures? So far, I really see Jason Kenney presenting himself, but not many others.
It's going to make for some interesting bedfellows, right? I mean, Jason Kenney's already opposed to it. Of course, Naheed Nenshi, the leader of the opposition. That's going to be interesting when we see Naheed Nenshi and Jason Kenney and perhaps a few others together on the same side of the argument. But, I don't know. Actually, I don't know who's going to come out as pro. Somebody will have to come out. I think Carney. To me, my biggest fear is the biggest unknown is Carney. I actually think that the success or failure of Alberta independence will really rest on Carney. And Carney can do something silly like cheat in the upcoming by-elections and prorogue Parliament and try and win a majority. And if he does that, he'll send me 100,000 more signatures. He's going bankrupt, so he could increase the GST or do something like that. I'll get 100,000 more signatures. And he could also he could sway it the other way. He could make a broken promise. I worry about Carney coming out and saying, okay, I heard Alberta and we're gonna consider changing the equalization formula, and for the time being we'll put it to zero. I can see him doing something like that. So I think the balance of power right now is with Carney in the coming weeks. But on the pro side, Kenny's an interesting character. I don't know why Kenny's showing up on the pro side all of a sudden. Like, is he been tapped on the shoulder by the rest of the Federalists and say, okay, you take it on the chin for us? Because whoever gets on the pro side is going to be, they have no leg to stand on.
Well,
like
yeah. I was kind of saying, if Nenshi steps up, that pushes more people towards Alberta independence. If Carney steps up, that's more people towards Alberta independence. As much as Kenney is somewhat hated within Alberta, he's the best kind of figure they have at this point. But even that, a lot pushes people towards Alberta independence. I'm going to ask you maybe a little bit of a strange question. If Carney does get a majority government, maybe on the 13th with the by-elections, Pierre Poilievre has been talking a lot about we need to put Canada first. Do you think there's a possibility Carney goes to Poilievre and said, we need you to kind of step up and keep Canada together, and he becomes the main figure?
Yeah, yes. So I would put that in that category of unexpected events. I mean, that would be asking Poilievre to put aside his partisanship and become nonpartisan, which I think we've already seen a little bit of that, right? When it comes to Poilievre, he came to Alberta after the election. He got defeated in the election, came to Alberta, pretended to be an Albertan, and won a riding quickly. He chose the second most conservative riding in the country, but now he's already announced that he's not running again. No, definitely not. Great question. No, not out of the realm of possible. Definitely not out of the realm. Do it for the country, right? Save the country. And yeah, I can see that.
Well, and one of the other reasons I was thinking is we see a lot of smaller parties popping up in Western Canada, whether it's BC One or a lot of ideas of independence parties that want to be a little bit harder nosed conservative. I was thinking maybe he would try to shut down independence now in order to shut down a lot of these smaller parties from popping up and taking votes away from the National Conservative Party.
Actually, I just want to go back to one thing, though.
Oh, yeah.
Don't forget this. Even there is an underlying noise which is hard to ignore, the uniparty concept, right? I've been trying to dispel that and say, no, there's two parties. But boy, like events of the last decade, the uniparty starts to scare me. So back to your question, if Pierre comes on board and collaborates too closely with Carney, that would actually, I think, if I dissect that properly, that would backfire, because then there's already people who don't trust Pierre in Alberta. I mean, if there was an election tomorrow, Pierre's already lost his the Conservatives would see an absolute reduction in the number of votes coming from Alberta. So if Pierre does something silly like that, I think that would, most people go, see, uniparty exists. Pierre's hidden agenda was there all along. So okay, so back to that, that would be a dangerous move. So what was the second question then? We were back to
Well, no, you answered it
the
fairly.
parties, the mini
Oh, yeah,
parties,
the
right?
mini
The mini
parties.
parties. Yeah.
Because they came out, the BC one came out the other day and said, we're going to have a coalition with other conservative parties, but we want to be able to represent conservatives in a different way.
Yeah, which is that now we're talking to a whole other interesting thing. Alberta had a long history of doing there's two ways: you petition the government for change, or you try to get control of the government. And Albertans here, we have a long history of fracturing the right and having all sorts of little parties. Like I can't even keep track of how many we've had. So BC's doing the same thing, other places are doing the same thing. But let's just say that Alberta's had 20 fractured parties over the last 15 years, and we know that that doesn't work. So this is so at the end of the day, I think we are finally learning the lesson that you need to do something grassroots like this, without leadership, without parties, take control, and then form a government. So I think I'm speaking from Alberta, but the fracturing didn't work, and I was part of the fracturing, man. I can't tell you how many parties I voted for over time. So I kind of learned my lesson, which is why I'm supporting the UCP right now, because it's the big party that's doing the best. It's been the best at unifying the groups, but on the side, we're doing our own thing. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Actually, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was gonna it is also ultimately there is no Alberta is the most conservative province in Canada, and Saskatchewan. I'll say we're tied. I'll stay there with that. And we have a history of being difficult to rule, but somehow or other, we continue to progress. I don't like it's weird. Whatever we're doing, people say, well, that's silly. And my argument to, if that's silly, we wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't be successful. We still wouldn't be the only have province. So whatever silliness we're doing works.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, because Alberta has a history of 93 years of voting conservative. And I think this is really the best argument why Alberta wants it to be an independent nation. And it's a bad idea to be the 51st state, because every 4 or 8 years, even conservatives in the US know they can be very bipolar with their ideology. And that 93-year voter history of conservatism gives a really strong base to an Albertan government, I think, going forward.
Yeah, and now, God, I love having these chats. That's why I do these chats. Thank you, because you're making me think of things too, right? At our core, Albertans don't want government. Okay, they don't. They just want a small government, and so that's why. And the problem that we're seeing manifests itself now, right? Like everybody says, oh, we should try and have a bigger government, that an umbrella government that brings everybody under control, which is like, no, that's not what we want. Albertans don't even want government. Basically, they want all to be independent. We don't like to be ruled. We need a government. It's sort of like a necessary evil. We just need somebody in Edmonton to dole out a bit of cash and keep a few things, but you will never get a single government or organization or party to cover all our needs, because it's impossible. You know what I'm saying? So by nature, what we want is impossible to achieve. And it keeps and that's why what we're doing works, and it's working. Like people say, you guys keep firing your leaders every 2 years like nothing. I'm like, yeah, because we don't want leaders. We don't want a party. We're happy collecting money, sending it, having a little group decide how to move on a few priorities, and then we change that group every year or every couple of years. And that's just, I mean, when Alberta became a province, we had no government. Like up until 1905, there was no government in Alberta.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because there's a lot of talk around the Constitution. How do we want to? How do people want to organize Alberta? And when you say, "Well, Alberta doesn't want governance, or they want to restrain governance," Professor Bruce Party put out his some of the things he would like to see in Alberta through a constitution. What do you think? Did you read over that document, or what did you think about that?
I read over it. I've met Bruce many times. I listened to Bruce. Whenever I listen to Bruce, he flips ideas. He makes me flip ideas on my head. Uh,
Yeah, he did the same to me when I watched some of his videos.
I have to read at the end of the day, I think Bruce is a little too atheistic and a little too pragmatic, and some of his ideas are way too difficult for the average person to understand. I can wrap my head around what he's proposing, but then I also have a hard time wrapping my head around what I'm proposing. Um, I like Bruce. I like his ideas. I'd love to debate him, but I'm not 100% sold on his ideas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a great figure to have, though, just to get the mind kind of thinking and bounce
Yes.
it off of other ideas that are going on in the Alberta space right now.
But essentially, what you described with how Albertans want to, or essentially don't want to be governed, that is one of the core basic tenets of conservatism. You want smaller government. You don't want government involvement in every single aspect of your life, which is what we see continuously in Canada. But another interesting idea, and I don't know if Carney's brain works this way, but would be if he gets rid of Alberta, then it's essentially liberal rule forever in Canada. If the
Yeah.
things continue to go and the polls continue to go the way they are. So it might be beneficial to the Liberals to let Alberta kind of go. I don't think they will, but that would be
No,
another strategy.
they have to weigh whether the money that comes from Alberta is more
Yeah.
important than winning. Yeah, you're right. If statistically, if we're gone, there's never a conservative government in the rest of Canada ever again, and the Liberals stay in power. Is that better for them than the money? I don't know. Time will tell. But as you were talking, you reminded me, we don't need parties. Why do we keep saying we need parties? So Alberta could have a constitution similar to what the Americans had at the very, very, very,
Yeah.
very beginning. I mean, you can have just people like different groups sending people to Edmonton every 2 years or 3 years, and then that group, no parties, just abolish parties, and that solves the problem. I mean, that's what we're asking for. We recognize that we have to work as a group. There's some projects that are better tackled as a collective versus as individuals, and very few of those projects, by the way. I don't like. Yeah, I'm on board with that. I don't want like Ottawa. Well, even what happened in Ottawa this week again. Like I'm looking at that list of projects. I'm like, holy smokes! Like they're getting involved in stuff that, to me, as a libertarian, like why is the government doing that? I don't know. I
Well,
don't know.
it almost seems to me like if Mark Carney does get a majority government, he's already kind of said he wants to federalize Canada. That means taking
More.
sovereignty away from each province.
Yep.
The main province that pushes back and builds the framework for every other province to kind of follow seems to be Alberta. And without Alberta there, I think a lot of the other provinces, even if they're slightly conservative or would normally push back against the federal government, just won't do it without Alberta there. They're the ones really blazing the path and trying to hold on to their sovereignty.
100% agree. Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think
No,
with what you said also, I think a good argument for Alberta independence is that you get that chance as a citizenry to build a new nation. How often can people get together and build a new nation, especially as citizens, with precepts and concepts that they get to decide, because it was a citizen-led initiative, and hopefully, and I continue to say this as well, it stays that way, and it is a citizenry that comes together also to build that, and no special interest groups just get together by themselves and do whatever they want. But I think the vision that most Albertans have is of that citizenry, citizen-led initiative, and now citizen-led nation building.
Yeah, and back to Bruce Party. Bruce, that's one thing I like about Bruce. Bruce says, "Listen, it's a leap of faith. You guys want something different, vote for independence and then jump into it and then decide what you want afterwards and be bold about it." Right. So I like that aspect of be bold, but I'm also an engineer, which is, I don't always like being bold. Sometimes I like just using what works. So if I look around, I don't need to be totally dramatic. There's a lot of examples in the world of places where democracy works okay, including right next door. I mean, I don't need to be completely bold. I just go to the US, take that piece of paper of theirs from 1776 and that those whatever 29 amendments, make a few changes, and boom, done. Away we go.
Maybe I'll ask you about what do you think Carney's and the mainstream media's framework is going to be coming into the summertime to go against Alberta independence. I'll maybe say what I think is he might be thinking and trying. And I think he had a lot of success with his TDS syndrome when it came to nationalists. I think he's going to want to try to say Trump is trying to divide us in order to conquer us, in order to pit nationalists against Albertans so he can get the polling numbers for nationalists on his side, and he can potentially justify using the Emergencies Act, or I don't know how he would use it, but I think he wants that weapon, and that's why he's challenging it in the Supreme Court as well.
Well, okay. I think that the Carney we're seeing now is it all changes on April 13th. Okay. So
Yeah.
that to me, I mean, the Carney you're seeing now is a very subdued, mellow Carney. He's nothing like his book. He's nothing like he was in the past. So he's definitely more, he's right in down the center. But even if you look closely, he's down the center, but he's still ignoring Alberta for the most part. I mean, his big long list of projects, nothing in Alberta. The list today, barely anything in Alberta. So he's, you know, he's focused on military and things like that. Those are places where he can redistribute money to other provinces pretty easily. So he's focused on where he's getting votes. That's pretty clear. And he's being cautious. He still gets a bit of mileage out of Trump. But I think if he wins a majority, even the smallest of majority, the Carney we see after April 13th is a different Carney. I think the Carney of his book is still there. The one that wants to control the money, control industry, control capital, control everything. I think it's still there.
Absolutely.
And I don't trust him any further than I just don't. I think anything he's doing right now is just theatrics. It's all theatrics, actually. Every announcement is theatrics.
And he's also strengthening ties with the usual bedfellows, but even making them even stronger, like China and Europe, which is also failing by themselves, but moving so far away from the US, where it is worrying that like the state that and the support he's going to get if he needs it eventually.
I genuinely worry some days thinking, my God, we're going to be on the wrong team. You know, we're going to be fighting the US, truly. Like, we're going to be on Team China fighting the US.
Exactly.
That's bonkers. Like, by the way, and that's the number one question I get on the side of the road, right? I got that question on the side of the road. And where I live, I'm not that far from, I mean, I'm hours from the border, but I joke to people that from where I'm sitting on the side of the road collecting signatures, I can see the border to the US. And the shared history between Alberta and the United States is different than the shared history between Ontario and Quebec and the United States. It's totally different. We lived life differently, right? Ontarians and Quebecers stared at a physical border. They had the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River. So literally, the Americans were on the other side of a border. And then they fought wars and they fought against them. And the history goes back to the 1600s and 1700s, right? The wars, the proxy wars between the Americans and between the French and the British fought in Canada on the continent. And when all of that was going on in Eastern Canada, here on the Western Plains, we had no border. Never had, like, literally none. There's no demarcation. There's no river. There's nothing that indicates where it was. It's always been just an invisible line. The Indians actually thought that was hilarious, that I cross this line and you're safe, and on the other side you're not. It was mythical to them. We never had a border. We crossed it back and forth, and we had a shared history and a shared system of values that was like almost indistinguishable, right? And between Canadians and Americans on the border. And we lived a different existence. I mean, my ancestors here 100 years ago were still building sod houses and trying to, you know, survive on the land. So again, it's like when Carney plays a Trump card, no pun intended, it's different than it is here. Like, I just posted about that today. Alberta did $179 billion worth of trade with the US last year, and only did $70 billion worth of trade with the rest of Canada.
And Alberta has that opportunity to strengthen those ties even further with the US as Canada becomes the enemy of the United States by siding with China and other worrying powers.
Yes, totally. 100%.
So that's another reason to go vote, to go vote and sign and just get out of there.
Well, I'd also like to maybe say I think it's going to be important when Carney tries to come in with this narrative that Trump's trying to divide Canada, if that's what he does. It's important Albertans don't take the bait and they say something like, Trump put his people first. We want to put our people first. Carney put his people last. It's important Albertans don't turn against Trump because he becomes a very important figure if the vote goes through and Carney refuses to negotiate or recognize, because we're going to need Trump to recognize Alberta as an independent nation, I think.
I'm confident we haven't turned on him. I mean, like I said, the relationship between Albertans and Americans is strong and very different than the relationship between Eastern Canadians and Americans.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. No, I repeat it all very often. I go to the U.S. I cross the border. I love my American cousins, and the border to me is just this weird artificial thing.
Yeah.
And I do think a lot of that TDS has been strengthened by the mainstream media. And I mean, the few that do still watch it around Canada are the ones that will believe those lies. But
Yeah.
I'm glad to see and to know, as you mentioned earlier as well, that Albertans are basically done also with mainstream media. And the few that aren't are in the few minority. So,
Well, also, maybe I'll ask a question about the petition here. And it's very interesting because before any of this really started, there was a lot of hope for 1 million signatures, this and that. I'm really glad we reached the amount that we did so we can have the vote. But I think it would have been a huge threat to the national government if they would have seen 1 million signatures, so much so that I think he'd be even more likely to potentially use the Emergencies Act or something like that. The fact that we're sitting at the number that we have, I think, is a real advantage to us because the federal government's going to be underestimating.
Yeah, in fact, I think the number's higher than that. I'm going to be on a conference call later this afternoon. I'm pretty sure the 177,000 was met, and then the signatures were coming in fast and furious last week, and because of this injunction that's looming, so I think we collected another 100,000 signatures last week. I wouldn't be surprised if we're in the 350,000 range. Millions out of reach, pretty convinced of that, but I don't think 450, 500,000's out of reach.
Yeah, that 350,000 is right around the range you put it at with your statistical analysis as well. So that's pretty bang on analysis.
Yeah. Math doesn't lie. I wish it did. Sometimes it's a different subject.
and moving forward, you mentioned it's now going to turn into campaigning and into the vote, the actual vote. Because I mean, if whatever happens today and throughout the injunction from the First Nations, but just saying yes, we're going into the summer and into a more campaign mode. What do you see as the most necessary things at this moment and entering into this new phase? Because it is an unknown phase, essentially.
People want to know. It's sort of some of the stuff we've been talking about. I think people who are undecided know that there's disadvantages. People who are undecided know that we spend too much money going to Ottawa. We're underrepresented when it comes to the vote, things like that. So the obvious is known. It's the unknown, that leap of faith. The 30% in the middle can't make that leap of faith. Unfortunately, there's a group of people that want more certainty. What does the Constitution look like? What dollar are you going to adopt? What do you do about, being landlocked and things like that? And the unfortunate answer to that is we don't know. I mean, we can make assumptions, we can make recommendations, but we'll never know because the day after the referendum, we'll have to vote on those things. We'll have to decide that, right? And so it's a bit of a chicken and egg, and some people cannot get past that leap of faith. I hear it on the side of the road all the time, like who will decide? I'm like, you will, but the day after the referendum, like we can't decide now. And so we're going to have to find a clever way to explain that to people, to get them to wrap their minds around the leap of faith. Like I still like the divorce analogy, right? I mean, if you're in a bad relationship, some people will just say, I'm in a bad relationship. I've been in this bad relationship for 3 years and I'm out of here, and leave in the middle of the night kind of thing. And other people will spend a lot of time maybe getting organized, find a place to live, go talk to the parents, whatever, get help, and then, leave in the middle of the night, but have somewhere to go. And other people will just can't go no matter what because they're scared of, where will I live, how will I pay my groceries, and so forth. So that it's the same analogy. How do I get those people who are just paralyzed? And it's weird. I mean, there are people, I've talked to people who literally internalize it all as if they're going to have to do it. Like, what currency are we going to choose? I'm like, you don't have to worry about that. Don't worry about, like, just leave, just choose independence. We'll figure out the currency. But if they don't even know how currency works. They don't even know how currency works, but they want an answer to a question that they don't even understand.
Well, I've been trying to look at. I've been looking into a lot more of Saskatchewan independence and the movement. I can't find a lot about it, but they just don't have the same leadership and I would say grassroots movement that the Alberta independence movement has right now. And even Danielle Smith really helped out Alberta independence in a lot of ways. And I just don't see Scott Moe doing a lot of that.
No, I mean, it's weird, right? It does come down to it does show that you don't need a huge movement. You need some really dedicated individuals. Like that's Mitch Sylvester. Like I can't speak out enough about what Mitch Sylvester has done. Like it's just been a superhuman effort to get out there and promote this. And then he was helped along the way by various individuals. You mentioned Keith and Jeff Rath and myself and Eva and whatever. But it's a good movement does not require millions of people. It just so and then Saskatchewan. I know some of the people on the ground in Saskatchewan, they will come out. I mean, right now they're just in our shadows. They're just in our shadows because our movement is so big but they're paying attention. We're meeting with them. They're learning from us and they will come out. I'm not worried about Saskatchewan. There's some great people there. But yeah, here we're lucky. We truly, I want to throw it out there. We're lucky to have Mitch Sylvester, man. That guy's a machine.
Well,
Like and it shows what and for the record, Mitch Sylvester is just a pissed off businessman. Like you pissed off the wrong guy, right? He owns a sporting store in Bonnyville, Alberta. Like look on a map, it's up in northeast Alberta. He owns a sporting store, and his sporting store also happened to sell shotguns and rifles and a few other things. And his business was affected A by COVID when it was deemed non-essential, and then B with the gun grab, and then a few other things. And you just lit a fire under that guy. And then the rest of the movement's the same way. I'm in the same boat. I'm in the exact same boat, right? Like I said earlier, who am I? I'm an engineer. When I was working, like I'm called Marty up north because I spent my entire career living in northern Alberta. And I've said this a million times. If you asked me in northern Alberta in 1998, hey Marty, you're a lot of the taxes you send to Ottawa are being wasted, I would have said, I don't give a shit. Couldn't care less. Couldn't care less. Got a house, not pretty, but it's my own house. I got fuel in a truck. I got a snowmobile. My 3 kids are playing hockey. I got a beautiful wife, and I can plant a garden. Leave me alone. I don't care. And Ottawa just couldn't leave good enough alone, and they kept interfering and interfering and interfering, and then they pissed us off. And they're going to learn the hard way. And I'm confident in that Albertans are different. The only real reason it took this, it's taken a little bit longer to get off the ground now, and there's a little bit of a struggle, is because we let in too many people in the last 2-3 years that are not like-minded. But we're winning them over as well. Like we're winning everybody over. We are different. We're built different.
Well, the federal government's in real trouble right now, especially with Alberta, because there's tens of thousands of people, not just in Alberta, but there's people like us that were forced out of the country and just have a fire lit under us as well that are really supporting Alberta independence, because we wish there was something like that for our province before we had left, and there just wasn't, and there was no hope. And we look at Alberta independence as really pushing back and making right what the federal government kind of not only did to us, but did to hundreds of thousands of Canadians over the last decade.
More
100%. Yeah. I mean, that back to, it's one of the lines that Bruce Party repeats, right? We're doing it for Alberta, but at the same time, we could be saving Canada and definitely a few other jurisdictions by doing what we're doing.
And also having that, just as you mentioned, when people have still doubts, I think that could be almost spun into a positive, that you get to decide. You get to be the citizenry that builds that nation. And when do you ever get that opportunity? Maybe it's scary because you've been used to almost being told what to do, but now if you're independent, you're able to have the say that you don't have right now.
Change is so difficult for
Yes.
people, though. Just so difficult, right? I mean, I worry that people will get into that three-sided box and they'll have cold feet and they won't choose independence. On the flip side, if I'm telling people, when you are in that box, ponder it for a second. Even though you already know you want independence, just pause, and when you put that X, let it all soak in, because you are making probably one of the biggest decisions of your life, and it will be a really cool one. Positive.
Absolutely. I mean, this is you don't see things like this happen too often. I've been researching a lot because we talk a lot about Alberta independence, but there are dozens of independence movements around the world, but none of them have legs under them, and none of them have an economy that will actually support independence in the end. You have Alberta, you have Saskatchewan, and they're really the strongest two on a global basis. And there's some here in Mexico, South America, Scotland has one going right now, but the only two that really are set up for success seems to be Alberta and then hopefully Saskatchewan. It's very interesting when I look at Quebec, though, because Quebec has natural resources. They just chose never to access them because they wanted their welfare or their remittance payments. And the fact that they didn't develop their natural resource sector, if they did choose to separate and then wanted to develop it, they would be decades behind. I don't think they could.
We never even talked about Quebec, and maybe we'll talk about them on another show, but that is another factor that's got to weigh heavily on Carney. Quebec is on the verge of electing a separatist party like they did in the 1980s and 90s. The Parti Québécois still exists in Quebec, and they're about to win a majority. So that's going to create another headache for Carney. And again, the way he deals with that, I suspect, will be like he's always dealt with it in the past. He'll just shower them with money, which will just flame Alberta separation. So it's going to be interesting. Quebec has more resources in the ground than we do. I mean, Quebec should be a powerhouse, like an absolute powerhouse. A perfect example of mismanagement.
Well, Marty, we really appreciate you having you on, especially as our first guest we've ever interviewed. You're absolutely fantastic. We hope you keep up the great work on X.
Anytime, man. Call me back. Bring me back
Yes.
bring me back when the referendum is declared. Like then we'll have another chat. Absolutely, love talking to you guys. Actually, you asked great questions. You made me ponder, and like I said, I love doing these.
Thank you so much, brother.
Yes,
Have a good
and
one.
thank you for all the information and for canvassing as well. I just wanted to say that again for letting us know how that is going. And we'll continue to fight for Alberta independence.